had to be handled has increased with a factor of 5. This year puts an immense pressure on the port operators and the whole system around ports in the kingdom. We have to handle more cargo, we have to handle on bigger ships. On the other side, though, 20 years ago, there were around 20 or 30 different shipping lines calling the kingdom, the various ports throughout the kingdom. Today, these customers are, by and large, the same. The only change, but that's a major change, is that they have grouped themselves together in alliances. So not only will the port operators have to handle bigger ships carrying more containers, they will also have to handle bigger groups of customers, much bigger groups of customers. And all these factors here together puts an immense pressure on the ports. And as I said before, the evolution is constant. We know this will continue. So we need to make sure that we constantly invest and improve in making sure we can meet the future demands. I did a little bit of research, being asked to do the moderation of this session here. I studied how various people or various organizations define public-private partnerships. And if you take all that text and run it through a machine, this is what it looks like. Reading the hundreds and hundreds of pages was a bit too much, so we tried to put it through a machine. But what really stands out is that there are a few words that come together, and this is not rocket science, and this is not the big surprise. But I think that the big surprise for all of us, or what we are discussing today at least, would be how do we make sure that these are truly partnerships, making sure that both parties of the tango here will benefit. And as I started out saying, let's keep in mind that this is not something new in ports in Saudi. Privatizations have already happened. The National Seaport Authority have already pioneered this 20 years ago. And now is a chance for us to discuss what the next stages of these public-private partnerships could look like. So, with no further ado, allow me to introduce His Excellency Dr. Nebeel Al-Amoudi from the National Seaport Authority. He's previously held various leadership roles with Saudi Aramco. Some will say that we are fortunate to now have managed to bring him to the National Seaport Authority to help us on the next stage for the public-private partnerships. Welcome.
بسم الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أنا بتكلم بالإنجليزي لأنه اتفقنا أن نتكلم بلغة واحدة كلجنة، فمعذرة عن أن نتكلم بالإنجليزي، بس أظن يمكن أسهل يكون لغة واحدة من جميع المشتركين. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sورين, for that introduction. And really, my point is here, and I'm the only one, I think, from the public sector, is about where is the Seaport Authority going to in the next phase of its development. As Sورين said, the Saudi Port Authority was established in 1396 في Ramadan as an independent body from the rest of the government organs. Its mandate was to monitor and develop ports, and it used to be run as a very traditional 3-year contract, services contract, let basically on an annual 3-year basis. So there wasn't a long-term vision for the ports. A few years later, in 1417, so as Sورين said, over 20 years ago now, the Saudi Port Authority at the time made a very strategic decision that was pioneering in many ways the privatization, not the privatization, I should say, the public-private partnership in the ports. And we started letting 20, 30-year concession contracts on a revenue-sharing basis with the private sector, whereby they operate, maintain, and develop the container terminals, the bulk terminals, and all operations and maintenance within the Saudi ports. So there really is now 28 to 32 contracts on long-term basis between us and private sector companies that are on a relatively advanced revenue-sharing basis, and therefore not in the old model that we used to use. And we have 2 examples actually in Dammam and Jeddah of the BOT model being employed by Red Sea Gate, which is Sórin's an employee of, and in the Saudi Global Ports in Dammam. So I would really want to echo that this adventure or this PPP thing is not new for the Saudi port system. And our maybe just a quick overview. I have jurisdiction over 9 ports in the kingdom. 6 are commercial and 3 are industrial. 4 on the eastern, on the Gulf states and the Gulf shoreline, and 5 in the Red Sea. And of course, the biggest ones are Dammam and Jeddah by far. And of course, we also have our friends at King Abdullah Port, which is a completely private port. Our model was a landlord model, and actually remains that. And so the government would still own, develop, and build the basic infrastructure. And we would also, part of our responsibilities is coordinating all the different government agencies within the ports. So we have over 14 different government agencies operating in the Saudi ports, and sometimes even more than that, between customs, border patrol, and other organizations. But as I said, we successfully transferred, and my predecessor successfully transferred the operations and maintenance and even development work to the private sector 20-odd years ago. And we moved on to even, again, to the BOT model, which I mentioned, and we have 2 great examples of that. One is the Red Sea Gate, as I mentioned, and Saudi Global Ports in Dammam, which are completely privately funded and with very little government revenue involved. And as I mentioned, these are long-term concession contracts in 10, 20, 30 years on a revenue-sharing basis. And through this partnership that really has developed over time and is a keystone to the future of Saudi ports, we're able to move the development of the Saudi ports to quite an advanced level. Having said that, that's the past. And we still have challenges to face. And so what were some of the major hurdles that we still have within the sector? I would venture to guess that the biggest issue that we have is a governance issue. We as SEPA have a relatively rigid regulatory framework that does not allow us to change tariffs with what's going on in the market. I think Soorin did an excellent example of what's happening in the market, and we aren't, as a regulatory authority, able to really react and be agile and being the real partners to our private sector partners in developing our tariff structure. And the other issue remains the multiple government agencies involved in the ports. This isn't a hardware problem anymore in the ports. It's really become a software problem. It's a problem of procedures. It's a problem of people. It's a problem of resources, a problem of not having the right IT systems. So we have the capacity on the seaside, but we don't have the efficiency in getting everything into the market. And this is where the challenge is. And we've estimated in previous studies that we've done that we lose as an economy as a whole to various players. This isn't somebody taking from one pocket into another, but the whole economy is losing around 5.6 billion riyals on an annual basis because we're not meeting the productivity levels that we should. So what are our plans moving forward? Again, as the government sector, the government representative here, and as I mentioned, my plan over the next 20 years, or 5 years I should say, is one, we need to get our governance right again. We need to get our accounting systems correct. We need to be able to optimize our IT infrastructure. We need to work on the software. We need to revise our concession structures. We need to have the ability to change our regulatory regime. So that's phase 1, basically, and that's maybe a year and a half journey. Our second step, which is a longer step journey, which is as important, is to have the right management model within SEPA, to give people the correct authority, develop the right HR infrastructure, have the right incentive plans for our employees to be real partners in the success of the private sector. We also eventually see that the infrastructure itself could be separated from SEPA's direct ownership. That is a longer-term plan, but one that we say is the next stage in our development of a PPP model for the ports. We've done the superstructure, the relatively easy side of the partnership, and we're looking to how can we now do the tougher infrastructure, less return on capital parts of the ports. And we're also going to be rolling out our new master plan for all the kingdom ports, and we're very close to finalizing that, along with making sure we have the right concession model moving forward. So maybe just quickly on this slide. So what are our goals for this year? Again, we're going to look into a new concession structure, which is much more performance-based, and driven towards operational efficiency. We used to be concerned about investments, and now we're going to be more concerned about the efficiency of our operations. We're going to invest more so in IT infrastructure, as I mentioned, and we're finally also going to have more transparency in our own internal operations so that we're able to react in the right way to our private company partners. And then the second step is how we're going to corporatize these basic infrastructure. We have already successfully done the superstructure. We need to optimize that, but how do we now do the basic infrastructure when you talk about roads, electricity, and so forth? And so ultimately, we're going to move into a more independent regulator with proper authorities, giving the proper authorities to the regulator to be able to be flexible, agile, and able to be real partners with our private partner companies. So I mentioned the new company. I also mentioned that we're going to also develop the next phase of our concession regimes with our new terminal operators, and we're coming up on some concession regimes that are or concession contracts that are going to be let in about 2 or 3 years, and then we're going to be able to basically try this new model that we're going to work on, that we're working on. So what does this really mean, and why should we change? Sorry, how do we move back one? I think it's important to say, why should we change from where we are? I think I mentioned a lot, and you'll hear a lot about in my talks about efficiency. One thing governments don't do is spend capital efficiency. So we need to move to a much more capital efficient way of spending that's going to be necessary in the basic infrastructure of the ports. We need to get a better governed authority that will also spend the right money in the right place. We have 9 ports with a very dynamic environment surrounding the surrounding seaports currently, and therefore we need to be much more agile in where we're going to spend our money and much more visionary about where do we want to invest the few dollars that we have. We need to, again, have a better government authority to be able to attract more volumes into the kingdom and to achieve its vision of being a real logistics hub in the region. I mentioned this again, but commercial flexibility. We really view ourselves as real partners with our private companies, the terminal operators, and 2 of them are here. And we think we need to be much more agile in our decision-making to be able to respond to their requests in order for them to succeed and therefore for the whole ecosystem to succeed. And finally, again, the new concession model will be launched. It'll be had a much more of a KPI-driven model, much more about efficiency of operations, less focus upon how the quantum of investments and more focus upon the efficiency of the operations, and therefore incentivizing the various terminal operators to invest more and more on their own in the superstructure for the ports. I hope this gives you a quick overview of where I think this sector will be going, and I think this is one of the sectors that we really, as a nation, have a lot of opportunities. We see our friends in King Abdullah ports. It's a purely private-funded port, taking advantage of the opportunities. We see the same in our own ports. We view my role as the authority head to be lean, agile, and commercially flexible to be able to deliver the opportunities that we have in the kingdom. I thank you for your time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for a very interesting introduction to the plans until 2020. I'm sure there's a lot of private investors in the room that have had a smile put on their face. Allow me to introduce the next speaker, His Excellency Sultan bin Sulayem. He's the Group Chairman and CEO of DP World in Dubai. He is the Chairman of the Ports and Customs and Free Zone Corporation in Dubai. He's been a leading businessman in Dubai for the last many years, and he has been playing a very crucial and important role in the development of not only DP World, but also on the tourism industry in Dubai and in real estate. So please, Your Excellency.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي الدكتور نبيل العمودي، الأخوة الحضور، يشرفني حضور هذا المؤتمر الهام في جدة عروس البحر الأحمر. في البداية بتكلم بالإنجليزي يا أخواني، أعتقد أن بمشي على نفس النمط. In our business, the most important is long-term planning. And I'll show you a few slides that shows what we've gone through. In the beginning, I'll give an example of Dubai. Government planning is very important. In our business, we are today in 31 countries. We have 71 terminals around the world. Our success came through private-public partnership that we have with many countries, including in Saudi Arabia. But government has to have a long-term plan to achieve its goals and to be able to capitalize on the investment. Investment in ports are long-term. So our relation with government are long-term. When you look at a concession, they are 30, 40, 50 to 90 years. So everything has to be looked at in long term. In this artistic impression, I'm going to give an example about long-term planning. I'll choose an example of UAE, which seen huge growth, and in particular Dubai. This is an artistic impression of Jebel Ali. It was done in 1976. The ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Rashid, when he decided to build the port, the consultants and with the contractor were talking to him to translate his vision into a port. And out of the discussion with him, this came. This reminds me a lot because if you look at very clearly in the top, you see a Concorde flying. And you see also some container business, not only where the container terminal, but there are new areas we never thought of. In 1985, when the free zone was established, I asked the government to give me more land. And they said, take as much desert as you want to the left of Sheikh Zayed Road to the south. And I went to the municipality and took us 4 hours driving. And the next day they said, we cannot give you all the land because there is an airport. So I went to Sheikh Mohammed at that time, and he said, yes, we have an airport. That was 1985. And I went by helicopter and didn't see any airports. And he said, no, we're going to build it. Now, in this picture, you see the airport, and you see the port, and you see the logistic park. This would have not been possible to achieve this growth or this synergy, because one of the most important success factors in a port is that you have a port, logistics, and an airport in one line, seamless. Because when you talk about logistics, it's a matter of how much you can reduce your cost. Every time you touch a container, it costs money. Every time you move it, it costs money. Every time delay it, it costs money. In this way, the port and the free zone and the logistics park in one line. Now, this is long-term planning. In countries where they have not thought to have that long-term planning, you cannot expand the port. And we have many examples in Europe, like Hamburg, but I'll give an example here of Antwerp. Antwerp port is swallowed by the city. There is no way they can expand the port. Luckily, we could. There is a saying that says, necessity is a mother of invention. And everybody today talks about new ideas and inventing new ideas. It's, the best way is when it comes out of necessity. In this picture here, this is our Rotterdam World Gateway. We opened it last year. There is something missing in this picture, if you notice. There are no humans in the port. On the left, the container cranes without any humans. The RMGs, no humans, no trucks. All the humans are actually in the offices thinking, because the business today is the business of the brain, of the ideas, and it's not anymore a business of doing something with your hand. If you want to expand and become bigger, then the people should be thinking of how to serve the customer, shouldn't think how to cut their cost. The same thing happened to us in Jebel Ali when they built these big vessels. If you remember, in the old days, my colleague spoke how small the vessels were. They were 2,000, 7,000 containers. Today they have 20,000. When they build a big ship, you have to build big cranes. When they build this 380 airplane, not every airport can handle 380. You have to have an airport that can offload the passengers and cargo quickly, otherwise it will not come. So we had to build bigger cranes. And then we faced a problem. We noticed that the crane driver cannot see very well from 100, 150 meter high. So I remember I discussed this with Sheikh Mohammed, that one of the issues is with this. And he said, if they can fly a drone with a precision around 7,000 miles away, you mean you can't run a crane? So we did a test about 4 years ago in a port, in one of the ports in Korea. And that port, a lady crane drivers demonstrated, and it worked. So we did the same thing in Dubai. If we haven't done that, we wouldn't be able to handle cargo quickly. Today, DP World is in 31 countries. We are in 70 terminals. DP World, in the last 10 years, we are enabling trades in 50% of the world economy come through our ports. Who can imagine a company from the GCC could achieve this much without hard work, without taking risks? Because a lot of time people don't want to take risks. And not taking risk is the most risky thing. If it doesn't work, so what? We'll try again. A lot of time, unfortunately, people try to study something that it will never, ever fail. And that's impossible. We only learn from failure. Now looking at Jeddah. Jeddah has an emotional value to us. Why? Because when we went out of Dubai internationally, the first port we went to was Jeddah. We had no, in fact, intention to manage ports outside. But our customers told us, there is a privatization of Jeddah port, we want you to go there. And we didn't comprehend it, we didn't understand it, we didn't want to do it. But then you always, as a port operator, you want to find a situation where your customer needs you. And we thought that was an opportunity. So we came blindly. We didn't know much. We were too late. Somebody else had the contract. We came in partners, and everyone knows the story. Now, Jeddah is one of the most important ports in the Red Sea. Jeddah has so much potential. The key is, how do we unlock the potential? This is the key. There are many things we could do within the rules and regulations. And in the next picture, and I would like to apologize to Dr. Almoudi, I have not consulted him. I don't know where this will go. Maybe the location I'm talking about is not existing or it's not available, but one way is you have to get the cargo out of the port. The port land is the most expensive land. It costs hundreds of millions to develop quay walls. You cannot use it for storage. The port is creating a congestion in Jeddah. How do we make the port work bigger and expand it and reduce traffic in Jeddah? The only way is to get out of Jeddah. So we need ICD, inland container terminals or depots. So in the yellow line, maybe around the port, and maybe in the pink line, go out, maybe 20, 30 kilometers. I don't know, I just did this from Google, but a logistic park outside, not just a logistic park, but also you will put all the truckers there. The warehouses for the trader should be there. The cargo should move at night when there is no traffic. In the daytime, there shouldn't be any trucks from the port. These are some of the things we looked at, because Jeddah is a very important port. Just to give you a flavor. For some reason, this is the second. I'm sorry, this is the first one I wanted. This shows you the importance of Jeddah. Why it's important. Cargo coming from the United States comes to the Mediterranean, goes through the Suez Canal, goes through the Red Sea, and continues to the Far East. This is the most important route, and it is in front of your doorstep in Jeddah. There is no deviation. Every ship that comes from the Far East, or if they're going to Europe, or every ship coming from Europe going to the Far East, will come to Jeddah. Which port in the Red Sea is important today? The most important is Jeddah. But it has potential. We have not unlocked the potential. Dubai, we are not on the maritime route, I have to admit. From the Bab al-Mandab, depending on the speed of a vessel, it takes maybe 70 to 75 hours in, 75 hours out. That means Dubai has a 150-hour deviation, while Jeddah has no deviation. And which country in the Red Sea is capable to invest and build the infrastructure? Saudi Arabia. Which country has better infrastructure? Saudi Arabia. Which country has the biggest market? Saudi Arabia. So Jeddah can be an airport. It can be a huge hub market. In the next, sorry. What did I do? Yes. As an example, Jeddah can easily supply Africa. Port Sudan is just across the sea from Jeddah. Sudan, as a country, from Sudan, you can supply Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, then from this side, Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic. So there are 7 to 8 countries that can supply from one African country. It's very simple. When you talk about Dubai, we have a lot of re-export market. Where do we re-export? The trader re-export to Iran, to India, and the region around us. Jeddah can do the same thing for Africa. But there are challenges to Jeddah. To unlock the potential that I'm talking about, we need to solve these problems. All of you know the problems. I'm going to repeat them, unfortunately. Customer service is lacking. The customer is the most important. How did we grow in the port? Because we know every need of our customers. And we are proactive. We don't need to wait until the customer needs the issue. We are proactive. We should think of the problem and solve it. Sometimes, when there is a delay, it could be the port. Say we fix the problem in the port. It could be the customer has a problem. We can't sit and say it's your problem. Blaming is not an issue. We should be proactive, go and fix his problem, even though it's not our problem, because fixing his problem is fixing our problem. We have to look at the customer as the most important. A wealth of information will come to us from the customer. That's how we design the port, to cater for the needs. Bureaucracy. I don't need to give example, everybody knows. There is a lot of bureaucracy in Jeddah. I am sorry to say that, but this is the reality. You are the businessman and you face it. Not because the bureaucrat like to have the bureaucracy, but people are used to it. This is the way to do business. Nobody thinks but should change it. Everybody accepted it. But what is happening is you are handling only as much business as you have today. But Doing something about it will then, of course, customs is a problem. Every container must be inspected. Container can't be released. Many, many issues which I don't want to repeat. The good news is the government is building rails, which is important. Of course, the question when they will finish the rail, because the rail is very important. If we can connect efficiently the ICDs from Jeddah, surrounding Jeddah, to the Gulf, then it will solve a lot of problems. A lot of people talk about competition, and people ask me, for example, if Jeddah develop, would it compete with Dubai? No, it will not. The reason is we are in Dubai, there are 7 ports competing with us. The closest port is 40 kilometers, and they're investing, and we are growing. When business is good, it's going to be for everybody. But one thing for sure, in my experience, nobody can take somebody else's business. Djibouti, we are in Djibouti. Djibouti cannot take the business for Jeddah. There's no trader in Saudi, you'll tell him, I'm going to discharge your cargo in Djibouti because there's bureaucracy in Jeddah. It can't happen.
Not, then there's no need for the government to be involved in something that's very commercially viable. As we think of the different public-private partnership models, and we look at what worked and what didn't work, again, I'm from the opinion that the model is important, but what's more important is how the risks are allocated and whether those risks are allocated to the party that can best manage and handle that risk. And that's what matters. I'm personally a big fan of revenue sharing model because that revenue sharing model aligns the interests of both parties. It is a model that is a combination of a performance-based as well as a market-based. It requires both parties to do their best to attract business and to offer quality service. And in doing so, it requires less supervision from the public sector over the private sector because both have the same incentive. They have the same objective and incentive to grow the business and to attract clients. So as we look at the risks, there's always the business risk, which, as I said, I'm a fan of sharing that risk between the two. One can look at the risk of investment in land and infrastructure, investment in equipment, risk of operations and maintenance, the risk of change in law, and other minor risks. But let me dwell on the risk of change in law. The risk of change in law is very important. It's very important to be considered because the private investor needs to be comfortable that there is stability in terms of the regulations. Now, you cannot ask the government to commit that the law will not change, but there are a lot of things that can be put into an agreement between the two, whereby, for example, a change in law can be considered a force majeure, and in doing so, you address that concern from the private sector. So these are things that one needs to consider as we construct the model and concession agreements between private and public sector. So going back to basically what do we need to think about in constructing and designing a public-private partnership and what makes it successful? Well, clearly, first we have to ask ourselves what makes a port successful these days. So before we think about the partnership and who's going to invest in what makes a port successful, a new port development successful? And I think I'm echoing the speakers before me by saying, one, it has to be the ease of doing business. It has to be the ability to clear containers quickly, to clear cargo quickly, to deliver cargo to clients in an efficient manner and in a less bureaucratic manner. So that's number one. That's an a priori, that's a condition precedent in any successful port development project. Second, the port has to build around it the supporting services in logistics, and doing warehousing, trucking, less than full container. This is these days becoming necessary for the success of any port development. And obviously, as I said before, these days the market is looking at ports that not only are placed in an excellent location to do transshipment, but that can also cater for origin-destination traffic. So these are three conditions for making a port successful. And then you look at a partnership between the private and public sector. The model can be constructed in the way that suits many objectives. Some models would call for the infrastructure and land to be owned by the public, others by the private sector. It doesn't matter. What matters is when you do that, you got to make sure that there's enough protection, there's enough term in the agreement, that the risks are properly allocated so that each party is carrying the risk that they can carry, and that each party is comfortable that there is reliability in terms of the regulations, the judiciary system in the country, and the issues relating to change in law. So these in summary are my remarks. I'm sorry because I think the slides I was showing did not reflect what I am talking about necessarily. This version of the presentation is an older version, and I just threw me off guard, but the message is the same that I was trying to deliver. Thank you.
Works. There we go. Thank you very much. Some interesting presentations here made so far. I think one key topic that has come through all three introductions has been this ease of doing business. I think you, Dr. Nabeel, you even put a figure to it, 5.6 billion real annualized. What could be, you talked about software, but how does PPP fit into this equation here?
Hello. I think the PPP model with regards to the terminal operators is about efficiency of operations on the queue side and so forth. And there, as a kingdom, we're not bad. So the incremental gain we'll get from that isn't as much as, again, the hinterland and bringing in the ease of doing business. I think the partnership, from a public standpoint, the pressure that the private sector brings to bear on the public to try to encourage and increase and allow for ease of business is exactly what we need. I mean, as a public sector, we need to be driven by smart businessmen and global companies that want to increase the efficiency of operations to drive more business into their ports. And ultimately, it all reflects into our economy, into the Saudi economy, if I'm talking about Saudi ports. I think that's where the partnerships helps. And I agree with my friend Ammar on the alignment of interests. I mean, we feel that the revenue sharing model, which was 20 years ago, aligns the interests of the Saudi Port Authority with the terminal operator to drive more business into, or more volumes, I should say, into the ports. Where we've lacked is getting everyone else on the ease of doing business to make sure that dwell times are down. We have unacceptably high dwell times of 10 to 12 days, sometimes 14 days on average, where if you look at our friend, my older brother, I say Sultan, and Jabal Ali, it's in the hours, if not half hours, that they measure their productivity. And this is where the next focus needs to be. This is where there are a lot of low-hanging fruits within the ports of the kingdom. And this is where the hardware and the software issue comes in. And maybe the other issue on the partnership is on a port community system, kind of an investment in a port community system, which at this stage we're looking at as a public investment to allow for the ease of doing business and reducing the paperwork, ensuring accountability so that we know who has really been delayed in this very long chain, and thereby decrease the dwell time, which is the main KPI that we are measuring from a CPAP standpoint.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that the 1 day or 1 hour dwell time in Dubai was not achieved in 1 day. How did you achieve that to bring down the ease of doing business?
Well, we look at all the steps that we have to take to reduce, and we find where the idle time, we find where the mistake. And today, without that, you wouldn't be able to handle as much cargo today. A big ship will stay a few hours. And, but it is the whole supply chain. It's not just the port. You have to be proactive, and you have to look at the consignee. What's his issue? Today we developed Dubai Trade, which is a platform that every importer and exporter uses to, because it's not just the port, it's also the customs, it's also documentation, it's statistics, it's everybody, it's banks. And so now everybody can schedule an inspection, can release a container, and payments are made without being to the port.
Thank you very much. In a second, we'll open for questions from the audience. There will be, we have a lady with a microphone there.
Mr. Nabeel, you highlight efficiency as the key issue for our ports around the kingdom. How are you planning to use machine-to-machine systems to increase this efficiency?
Use
Machine-to-machine.
Machine-to-machine system. This is why we want the private sector to do that. The technology is there. The application can be done. The public isn't the best body to implement it. You just saw from my big brother Sultan his presentation on the automation of Rotterdam. We would look to, and we do look to, the private sector to implement those new technologies, not because we ask them to, because in their own interest, to reduce their costs, increase Saudization by allowing the crane operators to move indoors. And so we will be driving that, but we want to drive it that our interests are aligned. It's not a forced investment, but it's that everyone wants to drive down their costs and increase their ultimate profitability. And we're moving in that direction with our private sector partners. So that will be the next phase of the development.
I can add, Dr. Nabeel, that in our Terminal 3, which is the pneumatic terminal or the semi-automated terminal, we have female crane operators now. And before them, we had actually expatriates because no person, national, want to sit in a crane. Not only that, the ladies decided that why should we be in Jabal Ali? Why shouldn't we be in Dubai? So actually we're building a command center in Dubai, close to their homes. And eventually we are looking at the technology where maybe she can do it from home. There's no reason to stop that. So embracing technology and taking risks. Sometimes government don't like to take risks, or they are not flexible to fix the problems. When the first port we did, our automation was London. And when we opened it, it didn't work in the beginning. It was a big issue because it's just started, and we managed to fix it. And I am proud to say that UAE nationals went to London and stayed 6 months and fixed the problem. So the problem that happened, it was unfortunate, but we learned from it. And now, with Rotterdam, we have no problem. With our Terminal 4, we have no problem because we learned the mistakes and we had contingency plans how to fix it.
Let me add one more point. In our current terminal, IPS in Dammam, that IPS is operating, now we have, I think, 4 cranes that are automated. And so again, we don't have crane operators that are sitting out in the heat and so forth, and they're operating remotely. Yeah. The important point isn't that they did it, the important point is they did it on their own, without real prodding by the public sector, because they saw that they could drive down their costs and ultimately increase their profitability.
I think, Soren, to add to that, in many of the developing countries, the challenge or the issue or the value of automation is not necessarily driving down the cost. The cost may be an issue in a place like Rotterdam, but it's reliability. The reliability of your workforce, coming in on time, not being absent, taking lunch breaks, the change of shift. These are serious issues in an operation, and that's where automation comes in and addresses the problem. The other comment I would have is back to the issue of a port community system. I'm a big fan of port community systems. I think they are needed to drive the efficiency and to drive transparency so that the customer, the end customer, sees and tracks his shipment all through. But I want to caution, because we've seen times and places where these kinds of systems have been implemented or forced for implementation on a countrywide basis, and instead of them replacing and reducing the processes and procedures, they became just another procedure that everyone had to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them. I'm a big fan. I want to do them. I want to drive the implementation. But we have to be very, very careful that they don't become yet another step rather than replacing many other steps.
Very clear. We have a further question down there.
Thank you, gentlemen, for very informative presentations. My question to Mr. Sultan. From the map you showed us that Dubai ports practically in, 15, 17 locations. My question, what is it, one model, one size fits all, or you have different models working in different ports? This is one. Second question, any of the ports you worked on or you're working on, any of them has a rail operation combined with the ports operation? Because you suggested that Jeddah has a, can you hear me? You suggested that... let me finish the question. أسأل سؤال بالعربية سلطان.
نعم. لا في صدى اسمح لي.
صدى طيب. لكن خلاص نبيل ترجمت سؤال.
اوكي ان شاء الله فهمت. بالنسبه لل PPP or in PP models, there are so many different ones. In each country, depending on what the government wants. So we don't have one model. There are PPP, but they are different from country to country. We have joint ventures. We have countries where we cannot own more than 51%, for example, so we stay in 49. And there are countries like London, for example, we own 100%, and it's a freehold, so we are not partnering with anybody. So it depends. Second. Yeah. Yes, in rails, in London we're connected to rail actually. From the crane to the yard equipment to the rail immediately. In Rotterdam, the same thing. And in India, yes.
Did that sufficiently cover your questions? Or was the first question around the ICD arrangement?
You suggested a dry port in Jeddah, right?
Yes.
So, and you mentioned we truck the traffic from Jeddah port to this dry port. Since you worked in rail or you've been with rail, it will make sense that the dry port in Jeddah would have rail connection so that efficiency is higher.
Yes, I agree with you. It has to be rail. It has to be unit to reduce traffic. Okay. And I think this is another project for a private-public partnership. There will be people who would love to do this.
I will talk about it afterwards.
But if I may pose a further question on that. During your presentation, you also mentioned that every time you touch something, yes, you add cost. Would we then not, if the real problem is the long dwell time that you introduced, are we then not just transferring the problem away from the quayside by creating the ICDs?
You want to get it out of the quayside as soon as possible. I give you an example. In India, India is a country which has very bad infrastructure. And we, as a company, run ports. But no matter how good the equipment you put in the quay, if there is no way to connect it, you will get stuck with the cargo. So what did we do in India? We heard they're privatizing rail. So we own our own train in India. We bought from the government company 2 trains, and we transferred the cargo from the port to the customers. That was the only way to move it.
But Sooran, I don't think your question is fair in a way. I think everyone is still saying you do need to solve that time. You're not just transferring it out of a port to an inland terminal. You're still measuring your dwell time. I mean, how long it takes to get to a customer door to door. I don't think anyone on this panel would say that you just solve it by putting it in the hinterland and then having the same procedures.
Agreed.
No, it has, once you do that, you have to look at every part of the supply chain. Everybody has to be efficient. Because today there is a lot of waste. You will have trucks waiting. In one port in Africa, we have trucks. We're talking about expanding the port. But the problem, the trucks, it will take them 15 days to line to the port. So the only way is to get the port outside.
We have a question down here. Oh. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. Walid al-Shahri from the National Commercial Bank Project Finance Team. My question is to Dr. Nabeel. You mentioned the new concession agreement model. Regarding that, as we know, there are some concession agreements are ending in a few years and some that are spanning till 2040. The current port operators, will they be placed at a disadvantage with the new concession model, or will it be applicable to all of them? That's one. The second question is, are we seeing any new private ports in the pipeline in the next few years, or is it just cake as of now? Thank you.
Your first question is a good question, and it's a tough question to answer. And maybe I'll just to say that once we release the new model and have finalized them, we'll have to deal with the existing concessionaires as well. Except to say this, the current concessions that we have, and to the right is one of them, are more advantageous than the older ones. So they're already at a relative advantage compared to the others. However, they've invested a lot more in new terminals, both RSTG and Saudi Global Ports and Dammam. And your second question is, do I see private ports? It's an issue of capacity, frankly. At this stage, our view, or the SEPA's view, is that we actually still have capacity in our existing ports. What we lack is what we've all talked about in many different ways, is the ease of doing business. So we have the quayside capacity, but then we just don't get the badaya out. We don't get the stuff out of our ports quickly enough. And the dwell time is a very easy factor to take. If we simply can have it from 11 to 5, you've increased your capacity without spending any money. And therefore, this is where Sultan and Ammar and all of us are saying, the supply chain is important, the whole supply chain is important, and how you operate your software affects your capacity and investment. So you have to look at that whole chain, including all elements of the government, all elements of the private sector, and the least efficient part of that chain affects your capital investment.
If I may add, Nabeel, the capacity is available, that I think we cannot disagree on. I think as we make Saudi Arabia's ports and logistics system easier to do business with, it becomes more attractive to the regional and multinational clients that want to establish these logistics hubs. And we become the country of choice, given that Saudi is the largest economy in the region, and then we would need to grow our capacity. So it's a cycle that's a positive cycle, and we have to plan for it, of course. But the first step is we need to send a message to the region, to the world, that we can efficiently get goods in, out, distributed, warehoused, trucked easily. And without, and I underline, without compromising safety and security, because there's always that argument that, well, we cannot because of safety, security issues. That's an argument that nobody can really scientifically support. Security and safety don't need to be compromised. The percentage of inspected containers doesn't need to go down. That's not the issue. But as Nabeel said, if we simply work 18 hours out of 24, not 24, then we're already way ahead of where we are today.
I think it's relatively simple. I mean, you have a capital employed, whether private or public money right now. You need to increase that current capital employed before you think about your next stage of investment. And we're not at levels that we think are acceptable by international standards, and certainly by even regional standards. So we need to increase that, and then if the capacity comes or the volumes come, then we can look at new private ports or public ports or so.
Okay. There's a question at the far table at the back there.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your interesting and insightful presentations. My name is David Charlier. I'm at Ashurst, which is a global law firm. I've had the pleasure of working on a number of projects, including the Red Sea Gateway financing, and also the pleasure of working with DP World on a number of projects. My question for the panel is this. Once completed and operational, what impacts does the panel see that the Saudi land bridge will have, both on Jeddah and on the regional container movements?
So what impact will the Saudi land bridge have on this market here? So the land bridge that will eventually connect Jeddah, King Abdullah port, to the market in Riyadh. What
Let me answer with the easy part, I think. I think the land bridge is a very ambitious project that connects Jeddah and hopefully Cap as well to the eastern province going through Riyadh. There's one aspect that's very important to it that relates to what Sultan was saying, and that's a Jeddah dry port. I think that element is probably one of the most critical elements to start with, and that can help in the efficiency of the Jeddah Islamic port. The ultimate effect, I think, is going to be attracting more volumes to hopefully the kingdom, and depending on where the final terminus is, it'll obviously change trade between the Gulf and the Red Sea. I'm not sure I have a crystal ball about how that's is gonna work, but it's going to be quite interesting, and also then the dynamics that Sooren was talking about with the number of container shipping companies frankly reducing and more alliances, the dynamics become quite complicated and competitive. So I think it makes everyone more competitive. I think it's going to make things quite interesting, hopefully in a positive way for the kingdom's economy. I'm actually sure it will be for the kingdom's economy.
No, I agree with Dr. Nabeel. Any time there is more ways to transport cargo, it's good news. Intermodal is very important. Today, you can use trucks or you can use a ship. But when you add a third, which is the rail, then it is interesting. Now, certain cargoes might find it cheaper to use the rail. Certain cargo might not. If you're shipping, for example, iPhones, it doesn't matter how much they're going to cost. They want them to arrive safely, quickly. But other commodities can go on trucks. But you're adding one more way, one more alternative for people. And once that happens, then people will adjust. And I am a believer in dry ports. It has to be a game changer. Today, people are used to each trader. He has his own warehouse. He has his own way, his own trucks. But eventually, and there are many transport companies, once you put it in one area, all the truckers will be there. The owner of the cargo, instead of having the warehouse in the middle of the city, he will have it next to the logistic park, and he will take what he needs to his warehouse or to his shop, linking electronically, sometime even they will know what they need. So in my opinion, it's good news.
All right. There was a further question at the table at the far end. Is it right there? Yep, stop. This one? Right there. Yes, sir.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Fahad Bachser from LSAFE Group. My question is to Dr. Nabeel, and it's about if there is any upcoming new ports or expansions in the existing airports that will be upcoming to the market as BOT.
I think I answered that question already. So new ports
Or expansions.
or expansions. I have a policy of only talking about things once we've achieved them. So once we have signed, then we'll announce it.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the audience? All right, I have one more question for Ammar. You mentioned your preferred model being the revenue share model. You talked also about the sharing of risks. How, in your view, are risks best shared between a private and a public partner in such a way? Where is it that the public are also taking risks?
I think let's first list the risks in any new port development and long-term operations. So there's the risk of business, which I believe is best to be shared so that the interests of both parties, the interests are aligned. And when the interests are aligned, as I said in my presentation, the need for setting KPIs and supervision, etc., becomes less important because both parties have the same objective. The second risk in such an implementation and development would be the risk of the acquisition and development of the land. So infrastructure and the land. And quite frankly, over the past 10 years, we've seen different models. We've seen the private sector do it, and we've seen the public sector do it. It depends on, again, the appetite, and it depends on the comfort zone of the private party with the regulatory system in the country. Because the ownership of a land and the investment in infrastructure is a long-term investment. It's something that the private sector needs to feel that in the next 30 years, things will not change in a way to disrupt my long-term investment. The return on that investment is not going to be in the first year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. It's going to be over the long term. So both would work. It just depends on the comfort zone with the regulatory change in law matters. And that brings us to the change in law risk, which, as I said earlier, it's a risk that one cannot avoid. Any country may have a change in law, but it's a risk that any concession agreement and any partnership agreement needs to explicitly address and propose a solution. And again, one solution could be you say, look, it's a force majeure. So when it's a force majeure, you're kind of protected against that risk. The risk of operations and maintenance and investment in equipment, in my opinion, has to remain with the private sector. Automation, as well, is a risk that has to be with the private sector. You have to take the risk of automation. It may work, it may fail, as His Excellency said, but it's a risk that you have to take. And I think the number of other risks are less important. But these are the way I would structure a typical agreement. I mean, it's no rocket science.
It's not rocket science, but a lot of hard work, I guess. All right. Unless there are any further last-minute questions from the audience, then we've actually managed to stick right on time, which is something we prefer in a port operation. So I'd like to, on behalf of the organizers, thank the panelists. I would just ask for just 10 seconds of your time. I've been asked to provide 2 housekeeping announcements from the organizers. One is that there is an application available for the audience to use to rate the quality and the ease of doing business with us here at the panel. The app is called JEF 2016. So if you would like to vote afterwards, you have to download that app, and then you can vote on how the panelists and myself have performed here on stage. The second housekeeping issue is that immediately after this session here, there will be a closed table session where different sectors within transportation will present projects during the coming period. For those of you who would like to participate in this, you are all welcome to participate. With that, I believe, Adnan, you would like to take on stage?
على فكرة يا جماعة الآن حتبدأ الجلسة الدائرة المغلقة، فلو سمحتوا يعني لو تكونوا في مكانكم، لأنه حنبدأ مع الوزارة الآن إن شاء الله. شكرا لكم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. مساكم الله بالخير جميعا. الهدف من هذا النقاش أن أصحاب المعالي وأصحاب السعادة معنا في هذه الجلسة معالي الدكتور نبيل العمودي رئيس المؤسسة العامة للموانئ، معالي الدكتور رميح رئيس المؤسسة العامة للخطوط الحديدية، سعادة وكيل وزارة النقل للطرق المهندس الهذلول، والمهندس نايف الجطيلي من هيئة النقل العام. الهدف من هذا الحوار أصحاب المعالي وأصحاب السعادة بيعرضوا عليكم الفرص الاستثمارية الموجودة للخصخصة أو مشاركة القطاع الخاص، وبنفتح النقاش لجميع الحضور نشوف ملاحظاتهم وشلون نقدر مع بعض نبني النموذج إشراك القطاع الخاص في هذه المجالات. وبنبدأ العرض مع معالي الدكتور رميح.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. شكرا دكتور عبد الله. الأخوة والأخوات الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. دكتور English or Arabic? English? Okay, I'll make it in English, and of course we'll interact in Arabic as well. Saudi Railway Organization is one of the oldest government organization, probably it is the oldest in the region when it comes to railway. The goal here, I'm going to give a quick presentation. Point, as Dr. Abdullah said, is to hear from you more than it's not one way, it's two way. And we don't have, at least for the railway, I don't have the model for the PP model, but we have an idea of what we are going to do, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But before I do, I'll just give you a brief idea behind what is SRO, Saudi Railway Organization, as I said, founded over 60 years ago to connect Riyadh to Dammam. In fact, it's older than the Ports Authority. Please say that.
Actually, Dammam Port used to be part of SRO.
Yeah, okay, so. What do we do? We have two projects in SRO. One is the Haramain High Speed, which I will talk about later, because already established, already the operating model have been identified, and we have a concessionaire who's going to operate this for 12 years. But I will just touch base upon it to show you what is the model that we have chosen then. And I can't say this model was successful or not, because still it is in the making. And also talk about the Dammam Riyadh, which is the oldest network we have, and the potential for the private operators, suppliers, what have you, to participate in operating this line. SRO, we have two services. I have one problem, I can't see actually the screen, but I can guess what's in the screen. We have freight operation. We have a dry port, Sultan. We have a dry port, by the way. It's in Riyadh. Okay. And this dry port, we transport container mainly, and from the Dammam port, we are only transporting 30% to 40% of the containers that are going to Riyadh. So we are short from transporting everything that is going to Riyadh, and the shortage because of limitation in the fleet size and in the staff and the dry port. But it is a golden opportunity for the private sector to come today in a very short time, can capture the whole market. And we have over 15 to 20% growth every year, containers going to Riyadh. So it's a very attractive business. In fact, it is the business that SRO is making money out of. And this is the growth. When it comes to passenger, we have 4 stations. We have a station in Dammam and in Bgeg, in Hafuf, and in Riyadh. And we are transporting about 1.5 million passengers every year. Just to tell you how attractive is this line, the utilization is above 90% average, which is something unheard of. You can't see it in Europe and anywhere, typically 60 to 70%, but our trains, we have 17 trips every day, and 90% utilization because the prices, the ticket prices are very affordable, plus the service is reasonable. And we can do much better as well with the private operator. And this is the freight traffic. We have, as I said, mainly container traffic going to the dry port, and we have few customers. We're transporting cement, we're transporting other products to different customers that are connected to the rail, but also for sure this can grow exponentially if we have the freedom and the financing to do so. I can't see the slide, but the goods transferred in terms of tonnage. This is the network rail. We have very ambitious plans, been in execution since 2006. There's the north-south line that Saudi Railway Company is in charge of under Public Investment Fund. And this line is mainly for mineral, and it's been in operation since 2011. Already transported over, I think, 10 million tons of phosphate and bauxite from the mines. Also, it has a passenger line that is going to be in operation, I think, end of this year as well. You can see the Dammam Riyadh line. I don't think you can see it here, pointer. But anyway, we have 2 lines, one for the freight that is going the south side, and one almost a straight line from Dammam to Riyadh. This is the passenger line. And this has been doubled. It's a double track for the passenger line, and the freight is, we are doubling the track as we speak. Of course, we are also doing the GCC. We're designing the GCC line, which is going to connect the. One day we will go to Dubai, to Jebel Ali, Sultan, and transport goods, containers from your ships, inshallah. But in terms of private involvement, private sector involvement, this is icing on the cake. As for the Haramain High Speed, the model that we have used in Haramain High Speed is the project has been divided into three segments or three phases. Phase 1 was civil and track, and this was now almost completed. Phase 2 is for the stations, and stations are some have been handed over already. And phase 3 is to build the systems, the track, the systems, and to operate for 12 years. The model was designed by a team of international consultants back in 2009, and this project has been awarded, as I said. We are doing some testing between Rabigh and Medina. The model was based on different compensation schemes, KPIs based. Revenue sharing portion was there. Since it's a green field network, there are guaranteed payments for operating the line, minimum guaranteed, but a big chunk of the revenue will come from the commercial revenue from the stations, and of course the and passengers, as well as any commercial ideas outside the stations. The consortium is a Spanish consortium, are now going to operate and maintain the whole network. So government paid for the assets, but the maintenance will be on the concessionaire for 12 years. After 12 years, it will be handed over to the government. There are many conditions. One of main condition of this contract is to localize, and the target is 70% localization by year number 12 in operation. As I said, this model is still being tested. As for the SRO, the Dammam Riyadh, we are working with our consultants, anticipating something between complete concession or joint venture model. The agreed upon model will be, of course, tested with the class 1 operators first, and for us to see the appetite, and then it will be announced, and the operators will be pre-qualified and will go through the process. We anticipate 15 to 20 years relationship with the private sector. Also, we anticipate a revenue sharing because this is not a new network. This is a very well established, mature line that is making money, especially for freight, and profitable, by the way, when it comes to freight. And we are confident that it will be very attractive to class 1 operators as well. With this, this is a brief about the Haramain High Speed, and with this I conclude, and thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. We have left one presentation. It will be done by PTA, and we'll make it last presentation at this. I don't have a presentation. I'll have some few words, and if you allow me, I'll do them in Arabic. And for our friend, I'll be very glad to give you a summary after the presentation. الهدف الحقيقة كما ذكر، الهدف من هذه الجلسة هي جلسة الراوند تيبل لموضوع نقاش أو مناقشة الفرص المتاحة في قطاع النقل. وكما تلاحظون الحقيقة حرصنا أنه يكون كل القطاعات اللي تخص قطاع النقل سواء في الموانئ أو في السكة الحديد أو في النقل العام أو في الطرق متواجد لهذا النقاش. يعلم الجميع أن الدولة خلال السنوات الماضية الحقيقة أنفقت نفقات هائلة فيما يتعلق في الكابكس والمشاريع التنفيذية، وأنا سوف أتكلم عن الجزئية المتعلقة بالطرق في هذه الجزئية. أنفقت المبالغ اللي أنفقتها الدولة خلال السنوات الماضية على شبكة الطرق، لإنشاء شبكة الطرق، لإنشاء طرق جديدة، وهذا لا يدخل فيها المبالغ التي تنفق للصيانة. 184 مليار 184 مليار ريال سعودي أنفقتها الدولة لإنشاء شبكة الطرق القائمة اللي وصلت أطوالها الآن 64 ألف كيلومتر، وتتصنف إلى 3 أصناف رئيسية: الطرق السريعة والطرق المزدوجة والطرق المفردة. هذه الشبكة الضخمة من الطرق التي لا تكاد الحقيقة ربطت مختلف مناطق المملكة إما بطرق سريعة أو طرق مزدوجة، ولا يعني يكاد تجد إما هجرة أو قرية إلا وهي مربوطة بطرق مزفلتة. هذا خلاف الطرق المعبدة، الطرق اللي نسميها الطرق التراك رودز، الطرق الترابية اللي يفوق أطوالها أكثر من 100 ألف كيلومتر. هذه الشبكة التحدي القائم أنه فعلا الدولة أنفقت هذه المبالغ خلال السنوات الماضية. خلال فترة التحول أو ما نتكلم عنه الآن موضوع التوجهات والرؤى والتحول الوطني وبرنامج التحول الوطني، النقاش يتركز الآن بشكل أساسي على قضية الخصخصة وقضية أنه كيف أنه يساهم القطاع الخاص في عمل فيما يتعلق في القطاعات المختلفة، وكما ذكرت نتكلم هنا عن قطاع الطرق. التحدي الأساسي أو من ضمن الأشياء الأساسية التي يناقشها موضوع التوجهات والرؤى والتحديات في المركز التدخل الديو في التدخل الإنجاز السريع، اللي هي قضية ما هي الفرص المتاحة لدى وزارة النقل في قطاع الطرق متاحة للقطاع الخاص. يأتي في مقدمة هذه الفرص أن موضوع صيانة الطرق. الطرق كان معروف لدينا بشكل واضح ومن البداية أن الطرق سوف تواجه تحدي كبير، أنه كيف يتم المحافظة على شبكة هذه الطرق الهائلة التي نفذت، كيف نستطيع نحافظ على هذه الطرق والجسور والأنفاق بشكل جيد في ظل الظروف المالية اللي قد لا تتيح دائما الحصول على الأموال الكافية لصيانة الطرق. ولذلك ظهرت قضية أنه كيف يمكن أن يشارك القطاع الخاص من خلال المشاركة والاستثمار في الصيانة. هذا جانب. الجانب الآخر لا زال هناك على الرغم من أن شبكة الطرق شبه اكتملت في المملكة، لكن لا زال هناك بعض الطرق تحتاج إلى تطوير، وفي بعض الطرق تحتاج إلى تحويل إلى طرق سريعة، وبعضها يحتاج إلى تحويلها من طرق مفردة إلى طرق مزدوجة، وهناك بعض الطرق التي تحتاج إلى إنشاء. وبالتالي كذلك كيف يمكن أن يساهم القطاع الخاص في إنشاء هذه الطرق من خلال التخصيص. وإذا تكلمنا عن الاستثمار، وكما ذكرت في كثير من النقاشات اللي صارت أنا سمعتها اليوم على مدى اليوم الجلسات، أنه الحقيقة الاستفادة للجميع، الاستفادة للمستثمر، الاستفادة للكلاينت للجهة الحكومية، الاستفادة لمستخدم الطريق، الفائدة للجميع بحيث أنه يكون الجميع كلهم كسبانين في النهاية. ولذلك هذه الآن الأشياء اللي نتكلم عنها، ولا زالت الحقيقة في مخاض مع زملائنا وأخواننا في مركز الإنجاز والتدخل السريع، والجهد المكثف اللي يبذل، ولكن وجدناها أن فرصة أنه نستمع إلى وجهات نظر سواء في هذه الجلسة أو في الجلسات القادمة غدا إن شاء الله، أو حتى في الاتصالات المباشرة مع الوزارة، بحيث أنه ممكن نطرحها من خلال توجهات الوزارة في مركز الإنجاز والتدخل السريع، بحيث أنه يكون فعلا نصل للهدف، وأنه يكون القطاع الخاص يكون شريك في هذه المبادرات وهذه التوجهات، بحيث أنه في الأخير نحصل على شبكة طرق إن شاء الله متكاملة وجيدة ونحافظ عليها بمستوى جيد، ويكون فيها فرص للقطاع الخاص بحيث أنه يشارك فيها، وبالتالي يشارك في تنمية البلد من جانب، وكجانب استثماري، جانب استثماري لهذه القطاعات المختصة. شاكر لكم جميعا وأتمنى لكم يوم سعيد إن شاء الله.
السلام عليكم. نايف الشطيري من هيئة النقل العام. سيكون العرض طبعا المعذرة للحضور اللي ما يفهمون عربي، راح أتكلم إن شاء الله بالعربية. سيكون العرض إن شاء الله لأحد التجارب الناجحة بالنسبة للنقل العام من ناحية اتجاهها من شركات حكومية إلى شركات خاصة. ولكن قبل أن أبدأ بهذا العرض أريد أن أعطي نبذة مختصرة عن هيئة النقل العام. بداية أن هيئة النقل العام أنشئت في عام 1433. كانت من أهم الأهداف الرئيسية لهيئة النقل العام تنظيم خدمات النقل العام للركاب والإشراف عليها داخل المدن وما بينها، العمل على توفير النقل العام بالمستوى الجيد والكلفة المناسبة مع مراعاة البيئة والتكامل مع النقل الجوي والسكة الحديد، والعامل أو الهدف الرئيسي أيضاً تشجيع الاستثمار في النقل العام. فبدون الاستثمار نجاح النقل العام لا يمكن أن يكون بشكل كامل. أبرز التحديات التي تواجه النقل العام: مشروعات النقل العام غالباً تكون معقدة ومكلفة عند الإنشاء وعند التشغيل. نجاح مشروعات النقل العام لا تتوقف فقط عند إنشائها، بل أنها تحتاج إلى دعم، تحتاج إلى تطوير، تحتاج إلى سياسات وتشريعات خاصة من الحكومة. العامل الثالث الاستدامة بالنسبة للمالية والجودة والاقتصادية. ندخل إلى موضوعنا الأساسي وهي شركة قطار النقل الجماعي هونغ كونغ. حقيقة سبب اختيارنا لهذه الشركة وعمل عرض عليها أن هذه الشركة تعد من أنجح الشركات في مجال النقل العام من ناحية السلامة، من ناحية خدمة العملاء، الاعتمادية، ودائما ما يضرب بها المثل في مجال النجاح في الخصخصة. أنشئت شركة MTR في عام 1975 بغرض إنشاء وتشغيل على أسس تجارية شبكة مترو حضرية تفي بمتطلبات النقل العام داخل هونغ كونغ. بدأت التشغيل في عام 1979 حيث نقلت في اليوم الأول 285 ألف راكب، وفي ذلك الوقت كانت الشركة مملوكة بالكامل للحكومة. في عام 2000 أعيد هيكلة الشركة وتم بيع 23% من حصة الشركة على القطاع الخاص على شكل اكتتاب بمبلغ 9.4 بليون هونغ كونغ، طبعا دولار هونغ كونغ، أي ما يعادل 5 بليون ريال سعودي. وبالنهاية دخل 600 ألف مستثمر أو مساهم جديد في هذه الشركة. في عام 2007 تم دمج هذه الشركة مع شركة أخرى مملوكة للحكومة، شركة قطارات كولون كانتون، وبذلك أصبح لشركة MTR التوسع الكامل في هونغ كونغ، وأصبحت تدير 10 خطوط مترو مع خطوط قطارات خفيفة مع خط المطار السريع. وأيضا حصل هناك ربط في الصين مع 3 مدن هي بكين وشنغهاي وغوندونغ. إجمالي أطوال الشبكة في هونغ كونغ 221 كيلومتر، ولديها 87 محطة بالإضافة إلى 68 نقطة توقف للقطارات الخفيفة. هذا عرض عن خارطة المترو في هونغ كونغ. بعد النجاح الذي حققته الشركة في هونغ كونغ اتجهت إلى النشاط الدولي. طبعا الشركة تعمل على مستوى الدولي في التشغيل والاستثمار. ففي عام 2007 قامت الشركة بتشغيل بعض مترو أو بعض قطارات الموجودة في لندن، وفي عام 2014 حصلت على امتياز تشغيل خط كروس ريل في لندن لمدة 8 سنوات. يعني هذه قفزة تعتبر هائلة بالنسبة للشركة. الدخول إلى السوق الأوروبية الرقم الصعب يعتبر في مجال النقل العام. وفي عام 2009 بدأت بتشغيل مترو ستوكهولم، وفي عام 2014 حصلت على حق استخدام الخطوط الحديدية من ستوكهولم وغوتنبرغ لتقديم خدمة نقل سريعة بين المدينتين. وفي عام 2009 قامت بتشغيل مترو ملبورن، وفي عام 2014 حصلت بموجب شراكة بين القطاع والخاص والعام على عقد تشغيل خط مترو الشمال الغرب في مدينة سيدني، وهو يعتبر أول شراكة ما بين القطاع الخاص والعام في هذا المجال. مصادر الدخل للشركة طبعا تعددت وبشكل كبير، يعني لم تعتمد فقط على تشغيل القطارات، وإنما اعتمدت على إدارة وتأجير العقارات، على الإعلان، خدمات الاتصالات، الخدمات الاستشارية الدولية، التطوير العقاري، استثمارات عقارية على شكل مجمعات تجارية وعلى شكل مباني مكتبية، حيث تمتلك الشركة في محفظتها الاستثمارية ما يعادل 212 ألف متر مربع للاستخدام التجاري، و41 ألف متر مربع للاستخدام المكتبي، وتجني أرباح ما يعادل 4.2 بليون دولار هونغ كونغ، أي ما يعادل 2 بليون ريال سعودي. فلهذا الشركة لم تكن تعتمد اعتماد كامل أو لم تتلقى إعانات من الحكومة، وإنما أرباحها تجنيها من مصادر الدخل المختلفة، وخاصة التطوير العقاري، بل وتعطي أرباح للمساهمين. استراتيجية النجاح: بنت شركة MTR نجاحها على الاستفادة مما يسمى اقتناص القيمة، وهذا المبدأ يقوم على حق النقل العام من الاستفادة واقتناص حقه من الارتفاع في قيام العقارات، الذي كان مرور الخطوط النقل العام سبب في ذلك الارتفاع، أي أن النموذج التي تعمل عليه الشركة كانت عبارة العقار زائدا القطار. كانت الحكومة تعطي وتبيع الأراضي للشركة بأسعار تفضيلية، وتقوم الشركة بتطويرها وبيعها بأسعار تجارية تجني منها أرباح تكون إيرادات ثابتة لهذه الشركة. في عام 2014 هذه الأرقام بالنسبة للشركة: عدد الركاب حوالي 4 مليون، طبعا في اليوم عدد الركاب في السنة أكثر من 1.45 بليون راكب، عدد الخطوط. جدول يبين جميع العناصر الأساسية للشركة في عام 2014. طبعا نجاح الشركة هذه لم يتم بدون وجود الدعم الحكومي لقطاع النقل العام، فلولا النقل العام لولا الدعم لقطاع النقل العام من الحكومة لما نجحت هذه الشركة. فكانت لها تجربة في الصين حيث ساهمت في التطوير العقاري في الصين، ولكن لم تجد الدعم الحكومي من ناحية السياسات والتشريعات الخاصة لاستخدام النقل العام. فخلاصة الكلام: نجاح النقل العام مربوط بدعم الدولة للنقل العام. وشكرا لإنصاتكم.
إذا في أي أسئلة تفضلوا يا إخوان. تفضل يا مهندس سلطان. ولا ميكروفون يا دكتور عبد الله. ولا هنا.
نسمعك نسمعك.
لا جانا خلاص. اوكي خلاص يا دكتور، شكرا.
انا اشكر معاليك على شرح خطط السكك الحديديه، وطبعا مين الرياض الجاف معروف ومن 20 سنه نتعامل معهم. نقطه مجرد توضيح يمكن كثير من الحضور. الناس ينظروا للنقل عن طريق الكونتينر عن طريق القطار كحل، ولكن لا ننسى أن النقل بالبحر هي أرخص وسائل النقل، وبعض الأوقات يمكن نحن نتحمس للنقل الحوادث بالقطار، ولكن النقل تتكلم عن تكلفة عالية. يعني نحن اليوم عندنا ندير منطقة لوجستيك في كازاخستان، النقل من أوروبا بالقطار $5000 الحاوية، النقل بالبحر عدة مئات دولارات، فعامل التكلفة مهم بعد.
أتفق معك أخ سلطان، والكل وسائل النقل they complement each other. ما في يعني خلنا أقول لك القطار مثل للركاب، طيب القطار للركاب إلى 600 كيلو القطار كمبيت مع الطيران، beyond it you lose. نفس الشيء مسافات طويلة أكيد النقل البحري بيغلب القطار، لكن إذا ما في إلا بر ذيك الساعة نغلبكم.
لا كلام صحيح. الله يسلمك. النقل يمكن إذا تقارن مع نقل التركات ولا التريلات طبعا أرخص. صحيح. لأن نتكلم على ايكونومي سكيل. ولا تنسى أن أيضا البواخر مرت في مراحل من تطور طويلة اللي طوروا خدماتها وتطورت إلى استخدام اللاند بريدج مهم جدا. يعني مثلا من جدة إلى الخليج بيكون مهم. في أمريكا الويست كوست والإيست كوست ما كان بتنجح التجارة هاي لولا اللاند بريدج. فيعني تشجعنا جدا على المحاولة.
تسلم.
الله يسلمك.
تسلم. ودائما في النقل وانتم ما شاء الله انتم الخبراء، احنا جدد على الموضوع، لكن دائما الدبل هاندلنج هو المشكله.
صحيح.
اذا قدرت تعمل انتجريشن كامل بحيث تافويد الدبل هاندلنج يون.
وهل تفكروا يعني 2 كونتينرز اون توب ولا فقط
لا دبل ستاك كله؟
دبل ستاك. ممتاز. ممتاز. الله يقويكم.
للرياض دبل ستاك.
دبل ستاك
ممتاز. الله يقويكم.
تسلم. شكرا.
سؤال ثاني تفضل يا.
السلام عليكم. عبد العزيز السالم، مدير قطاع الأعمال بشركة النقل الجماعي. مساكم الله بالخير جميعا. الأسئلة كثيرة لكن خليني أختصرها شوي في تعليق بسيط فيما يتعلق، قد يكون هذا موجه للدكتور رميح، فيما يعني نتكلم عن الانتجريشن أو التكامل في خدمات النقل. فاليوم إذا نتكلم عن الSRO تحديدا، خلينا نتكلم عن قطار الحرمين. قطار الحرمين طبعا يبتدي من المدينة المنورة مرورا بمدينة مكة عبد الله الاقتصادية مرورا بجدة إلى مكة المكرمة. في عدد من المدن والهجر والقرى اللي لا شك محيطة بهذه المناطق اللي تحتاج إلى ربط عبر من خلال محطات القطار، وأيضا ربط المحطات القطار اللي في المدن هذه بالداون تاون أو أواسط المدن. فهذه من القضايا اللي مهمة. فما أدري هل هي مطروحة الآن في المؤسسة، هل سبق التفكير فيها؟ فهذا بشكل مختصر. شكرا.
تسلم أخوي العزيز. قطار الحرمين السريع هو سريع، يعني 300 كيلومتر الأوبريشن سبيد والأوبريتنج سبيد. في المدينة يرتبط بمترو الفيوتشر بلان لمترو المدينة. طيب سيم ثينج في جدة، محطة المترو أندر ديزاين ناو لكنها مربوطة. في مكة احنا على الدائري الثالث ومربوطين مع طريق الملك عبد العزيز أو أم القرى إلى الحرم. الانتجريشن موجود والتنسيق قائم. بعض المشاريع يمكن ما انتهت، بعضها ما بدأ، لكن ما نستغنى عن النقل الجماعي ترى حقيقة. يعني الباص نتورك هذا مهم جدا، حتى لو ما أنشأ المترو مهم جدا في المدن، لأنه في مدينة منورة عندك، احنا في مدينة المعرفة، يعني في مسافة اللي بيروح الحرم يحتاج اللاست مايل، هذا يحتاج شركات زي شركاتكم تو كومبلمنت. وهذا بيصير فيه إن شاء الله نقاش مع كل المقدمين الخدمات عشان فعلا السيملس يصير، ما يقلق المسافر بيروح الحرم يعرف انه خلاص كل الترب حقته منتهيه ومحسومه، ويفكر فقط كيف يوصل للحرم بس. ف ويل تيك النقطه. بعض المشاريع اكتملت بعضها ما اكتمل، لكن الماستر بلان حقتها واضحه، الربط لازم يتم. حتى على فكره في الباص نتورك في جده وفي مكه محطات الباص نتورك اللي طرح واللي حيطرح في جده، في محطات مربوطه في تصل للمحطه الرئيسيه للقطار. شكرا.
بس اذا سمحت لي، بس هذا الشق من السؤال. في الشق الاخر فيما يتعلق برضو
بالقرى
صحيح.
والله شوف، القرى والمدن يعني لازم تكون الامور فيزبل. يعني خليني اقول لك صراحه، يعني كان في حديث عن ربط صالة الحجاج مع صالة المطار، جنب صالة المطار. في الهاي سبيد أنت يكل الهاي سبيد إذا كثرت محطات قريبة من بعض حقيقة، ولازم يكون في جاستيفيكيشن. أنت تارجت 40 مليون مسافر بالسنة، تارجت كل 10 يعني بالبيك كل 10 دقائق قطار، بتحط محطات كثيرة أنت أعدمت الأوبريشن. الترافيك وين صاير؟ الناس وين موجودين؟ هذا مهم. طلعت مدينة صار في عدد كبير وهي تمر بالخط أكيد، لكن ما تقدر تقول هاي سبيد. صار كميوتر ريل، صار يعني مثل القطارات البصر اللي تمشي 80 90 وتوقف وتركب الناس، لا هذا هاي سبيد. فيعني ممكن بعدين فيد يعني يجي فيد من في ترافيك مهم تجيبه بكمبيوتر ريت توصله للمحطة الرئيسية زي ما كل دول العالم، لكن الهاي سبيد لا ما تغامر في تكثير المحطات قريبة من بعض.
أي سؤال آخر؟
جاء من النوم الشباب.
شكلنا دكتور عبد الله احنا انتهينا، ولذلك الكلمة لك الآن.
اخترنا.
أنا have nothing to add، بس ودنا نشكر أصحاب المعالي وأصحاب السعادة لحضورهم ووقتهم الثمين اللي أعطونا إياه، وشاكرين للحضور جميعهم، وشكرا لكم وطاب مساءكم جميعا.